What you saw there was... Huh? What the... Why is my voice filter... God damn, the machine work!
Alright, there we go. What you saw there was the result of one man's melodramatic actions. Feeling so betrayed by a single video game that he whipped it miles into space. What was it that this little GameCube game did to deserve this? StarFox Adventures is known as that one really bad game in the series, and I don't get why. Compared to most other Star Fox games, it's drastically different to what you would expect, which is where most of that hate stems from. Around the time, Star Fox was known for their on-rail shooter gameplay, so to have that be completely sidelined in favor of something vastly different, I understand why some might hate that, but personally, I think Star Fox Adventures is really enjoyable. However, many others online have expressed that, just maybe...
Why would someone do that? Wait, what's that?
It might not be as good as I think it was. Now, granted, I played this game as a bumbling toddler. It's one of the first video games I fondly remember from my childhood, so you could totally say this is just nostalgia speaking. Star Fox Adventures is by all means a video game, and whether it's good or not depends on what Mr. Reviewer Man says in this video I'm watching. Adventures wanted to try something new for the Star Fox series, and it was met with mixed reactions. I personally think trying to mix up a series gameplay is refreshing, but in this case, it wasn't the best. Though it is kind of hard to say Star Fox Adventures gameplay was lackluster when you remember how it even got to this point. Let's quickly change back the clock some 20 odd years ago for a little history lesson. You know, back when dinosaurs walked the planet. Did you get the joke? Dinosaur Planet was what could have possibly been an all-time Nintendo 64 classic. Back then, Rare had been working on this new game set in a prehistoric world. It would follow the roles of two characters, Saber and Crystal. It looked to be a very ambitious N64 title. Looked being the key word here. This is what Adventures was before it was branded as Star Fox. 20 years later, the title still holds its legacy of not being the game fans wanted. Seeing the critical reception online as a kid honestly kind of angered me. It's the game that I grew up with, and I couldn't stand seeing all the slander it got. But that has led me to this very moment. Kinda. I mean, I don't really give a shit anymore, but I want to use this moment as a time to revisit the game and find out for sure if I am blinded by nostalgia, or if JonTron was in the right to throw this disc away. In the same vein that people reminisce about Banjo-Kazooie or really anything from Rareware back then, most of their games have a charm to them that can't really be replicated. Maybe it's just that I'm talking about how old they are and how different modern gaming is, but something about the low-resolution textures, the abysmal overuse of stock sound effects, and the funky-sounding music all tie in so well together. Maybe, again, it's just nostalgia speaking for me. If you grew up with a Rareware-made game from around this time, you get what I mean. Returning to the game years later and walking around the same areas I once did brought me right back to the good old days. All the same locations I fondly remember, like the Snowhorn Wastes. Then you've got the mysterious Krazoa Palace. And lastly, my personal favorite area, Cape Claw. Later game areas like the Walled City or Moon Mountain Pass range vastly different from each other. Admittedly, it's very cobbled together loosely, and you could make the argument that these areas get reused in half-assed ways. Now, I would love to pretend that this game is all sunshine and rainbows, but I can fully admit that there are aspects that got really messed up in the final cut. Most notably, the voice acting gets quite a lot of criticism here. If you've watched other videos about StarFox Adventures, you've seen this scene get blasted front and center. And yeah, it does sound pretty funny, but I wouldn't say this specific moment speaks for the entirety of the voice acting. Most of the stuff that gets pointed out as bad tends to come off as more nitpicky. However, there was always one thing that I really never liked, and that was General Scales as a villain, and the overall story it tried to tell. If I had a nickel for every time Nintendo put focus on a new villain in their flagship series, only to sideline them at the end for the main series villain, one of these is worse than the others, but I'm not talking about Zelda today, so. General Scales is one of the least threatening villains I have ever seen. He makes it very clear that he's a tyrannical dictator who plans to rule Dinosaur Planet. Seriously, that is the first line of dialogue he says. But by the end of the game, you realize he's just being used as a puppet by none other than Andross himself. Without sugarcoating it, I was always very disappointed in this. In my mind, if you're going to create a villain and then establish him as the big bad guy, then I want him to be the big bad guy. But instead they chose to switch it to Andross last second with no foreshadowing, let alone a single hint at the idea, and I was left disappointed. Multiple times through the game, you hear what Scales did in the past, and the only time you see anything like that in action is at Cloud Runner Fortress. That, coincidentally, also ends up being the last time you see him until the end of the game. And just when you think Fox is fully ready to take on Scales in this climactic boss battle, there just isn't one. Even as a kid, I found this inexcusable and was incredibly upset. None of what was presented felt like it meant anything because General Scales is clearly a watered-down version of what the writers initially wanted. Now, keep in mind, this is the worst part of the story, not the only bad part. Adventures has two key objects to its story, the Spellstones and the Krazoa Spirits. From the very start, the Spellstones are noted as being very important, and I don't really see anything wrong with that side of the story. The Spellstones were taken, the planet broke apart, go get them back. The Krazoa Spirits, on the other hand, have never really felt like something to be focused on. It feels more like going on a side quest rather than ultimately accomplishing your mission. It's not like Fox has to do this either. He was never ordered by General Pepper to do so, and no main character asked him to. Fox just started tripping off of the Moon Mountain fumes, and then he started hearing and seeing shit.
A Krazoa!
Do you wish to accept our test?
What the fuck? The Krazoa themselves are very important, if not just as important as the Spellstones. But because it's so loosely explained what purpose they serve, most players either forget the importance of them or just don't care enough to learn. When playing as Crystal at the start of the game, you're told that the Krazoa are peaceful spirits that give life to the planet, and without them, the planet dies. But that's all. It's explained once to you at the start of the game and it's never brought up again. If that's the case, then that is something that should have been explained to Fox, as it aligns exactly into his mission. You also never see the consequences of the missing Krazoa like you do with the Spellstones. So if anything, it feels like the only purpose they serve is to help Crystal. I think it would have been a lot more visually clear if, as you're walking around Saria, you see bits and pieces of the world dying. Imagine walking into Cape Claw and noticing that a large portion of the water is murky or even poisoned. Environmental details like that showcases the significance of the Krazoa just like the spellstones are to the planet's structure. It always felt like the Krazoa were meant for a larger purpose that unfortunately we just couldn't see fulfilled. While doing some research, I stumbled upon this angrily written excerpt about Dinosaur Planet. Shigeru Miyamoto pointed out that the secondary protagonist of the game, Saber, looked similar to Fox McCloud. This caused Nintendo to force Rare to butcher the game. StarFox Adventures is crammed with glitches, plot holes, and other nonsensical things. Thus, StarFox Adventures was never able to become a good title. Rare mourns the loss of Dinosaur Planet. Years later, I can agree that StarFox Adventures is not the perfect game I thought it was, but the one thing I could never understand, and still don't, is why do people treat it this way? Why do so many people act like it's a blemish on the GameCube's library when, at its worst, it's just a mediocre Zelda game? Why do so many people hold negative opinions on this game solely because it's not Dinosaur Planet? That premise is what started this video for me. Making small jokes about JonTron's video where he rightfully expresses that he doesn't like the game, with the whole climax being that it's so bad it deserves to be thrown away. And to someone like me at the time, it confused me. If we never really knew how much stuff was cut out of the game, then what was the point of hating StarFox Adventures for not being Dinosaur Planet? For all we knew, it was just the same game with a StarFox coat of paint, and if it was, then can we really say it's the fault of StarFox? It's something we aren't supposed to find out, and probably never will. Except we do. To me, this has always been one of the most interesting scrapped video games to ever exist. Not just because it's tied to one of my favorite games, but out of genuine curiosity to what Dinosaur Planet is supposed to be. And above all, I really just need to know for sure how much of this game was affected by the branding change to StarFox. The short answer, dear viewer, is a lot more than I expected. People have gathered the remains of Dinosaur Planet, and it really is just a significantly more interesting experience. Which is not what I was expecting myself to say. I originally wanted to leave this video as an open question, wondering why Dinosaur Planet was favored more than Adventures, but the more footage I watched, the more invested I was, and at some point I realized my opinion had changed. Step by step, I want to just compare the two openings of the games, because despite them being so similar, the way they were handled is drastically different. Remember that beginning message at the start of Adventures I mentioned? The one that fades away to... Did I mention that? I don't think I mentioned that. These few sentences leave so many questions unanswered to the player, and that's the last thing you want when opening the game. For example, it immediately states that Crystal is from somewhere else in the Lilat system, not Dinosaur Planet itself. It's never explained how she got here, which would normally be fine, but with her design and her knowledge of fluently speaking in dino speech, it really feels like she is from here. But by far the most interesting thing is the reason she is exploring the Lilat system to begin with is because she's investigating the death of her parents. That's just never mentioned again. Like, genuinely, this message fades too quickly. I have never read that part. When Crystal is on screen, she talks about a distress call that mentioned a mountain hidden in a storm, but couldn't describe further due to the vagueness. From there, General Scales shows up, and as Crystal tries to fight back, she loses her staff. And for years, this has been an opening cutscene that I never really questioned before. Dinosaur Planet, on the other hand, plays this event differently. Crystal mentions the exact same garbled distress call, but this time pinpointed to an actual character. From there, it refers to the same mountain in the next line. And the third and final line is talking about a new character known as Princess Kite. This exact scenario still leaves questions to the player unanswered, but all of which get answered soon after. Whereas in Adventures, you're briefly told something, that same thing is never brought up again, and you forget about it. Once getting onto the galleon and meeting General Scales, things start differing a lot more. The obvious one being that Crystal has her staff in Dinosaur Planet, so the combat tutorial is sooner. But that's not the notable difference here. Crystal is here to save Princess Kite from Scales as per the distress call requested. General Scales met with this same wizard and knew of Crystal's arrival, saying that he had threatened the wizard and will do the same to the Queen Cloudrunner. The only reason why Crystal even successfully saved Princess Kite is because Scales was dumb and held onto a metallic cage in a thunderstorm. But over in StarFox Adventures, General Scales is written differently, showing more of his tyrannical side. Crystal, being only briefly told about General Scales from the Cloud Runners, has no reason to be on this ship. With no way to defend herself, General Scales grabs her and throws her off the ship, only for her to land on a Cloud Runner and just fly away. So not only did this entire conversation amount to nothing, the trapped baby Cloud Runner was just left to die, I guess. All this scene did was set General Scales up as a villain and nothing else. Back in Dinosaur Planet, Crystal not only successfully saves Princess Kite, but also steers the galleon towards her destination. That being a completely scrapped location called Warlock Mountain, which is supposed to be like Krazoa Palace. But in Adventures, Crystal does not save the baby Cloud Runner. She gets made a fool of by General Scales, and then she goes away to Krazoa Palace, which, by the way, now looking at it, does not resemble a mountain. I never once saw this as a mountain. I thought it was just like a floating palace. I can't even begin to count the amount of changes and things scrapped completely between these two games. One that stood out to me was when Fox is kidnapped and taken to Lightfoot Village, where you have to command a friendly Cloud Runner to chase away the Lightfoot. The reason being that since this happens after Fox helps out the Cloud Runner tribe, it's basically their way of saying thanks. But in Dinosaur Planet, Crystal is in this position and Princess Kite herself blasts away the Lightfoot. Since commanding your little animal friend is a big aspect in both games, it logistically made more sense. Even at times where I thought Adventures improved something, I was proven wrong. Cape Claw visually looks nicer compared to Dinosaur Planet, where it's a lot more barren, but what I failed to realize is that is on purpose. Originally, Cape Claw was actually used as a traversal area to sail the open ocean to new areas. I cannot rightfully look at all of this and say StarFox Adventures is the better game. No one likes admitting that their childhood favorite game might not be as good as they thought, but I've grown to accept it. I can't think of another game that had so much publicity and marketing done for it, only for it to change completely at the very end of development. Let alone one that took on a completely different style of gameplay and branding. Nostalgia can hold a tight grip on a person, oftentimes skewing their interests or even making a simple change of opinion difficult. StarFox Adventures is what I consider to be one of the very first video games I have ever played, and from that I find it very hard to say it isn't my favorite game of all time. However, the more amazing games I experience, the harder it is to say that Adventures was perfect. It's flawed, and in most ways, a downgrade of what Rare wanted. Being able to critique, or at the least, understand the flaws of a game you adore, is a more healthy alternative than saying, "No, this is amazing, you're wrong." I've come to realize in recent years that the term nostalgia blindness can be more literal than initially thought. I know I, for one, have stopped myself from replaying childhood games because I'm scared I might not enjoy it as much. In the case of StarFox Adventures, that did kind of happen, but I'm not regretful about that. I'm happy that despite my changed opinion, I can still enjoy this game to the fullest, while critiquing its flaws and understanding why others didn't like it. I started this video off jokingly poking fun of JonTron's old StarFox video, cause when I initially watched it all those years ago, I couldn't believe other people didn't have the same sentiment I did. I thought it was unfair to hate a game just because it wasn't what you wanted, but after seeing just how much was actually scrapped, we lost what could have been a tremendous game. JonTron, I owe you an apology. You were right to throw away StarFox Adventures, and the grudge I held was silly. As retribution, I will be listening to your cover of Katy Perry's Firework daily for all of next year. If you'll excuse me. Hey there, very rare for me to actually say something at the end of a video. I made a promise to get this out in September. That I'm not gonna make a promise like that again, sorry. It happens, you know, unfortunately I just had some problems with the production of this video. Still, if you enjoyed it, it would mean a lot to me if you considered sticking around for more. I have some big projects in the work, I have some smaller projects, and I have a lot of stuff to do on Mental Hole. If you don't know what Mental Hole is, that's just a channel I help edit for, and soon I'll be in some videos too, so I suggest checking them out. That being said, thanks for watching. It means a lot for me.